was just another calm Los Angeles evening. The sun was dipping low behind the skyline, painting the streets in shades of gold and shadow. Steven Seagal, actor, martial artist, and reserve deputy sheriff, was driving home after a long day of filming a martial arts segment for a charity event. Dressed in his usual black jacket and tinted glasses, Seagal decided to stop at a small gas station on the edge of town. The place was quiet. A few cars, a tired clerk behind the counter, the hum of the city fading into the distance. As he stepped out of his car and began to refuel, a police cruiser slowly rolled into the station. The officer behind the wheel looked young, maybe early 30s, but his eyes were sharp. Too sharp. He stared at Seagal's black SUV, the tinted windows, the dark clothes, and immediately suspicion took over. The cruiser's lights flicked on. Red and blue reflected off the metal pumps. "Sir," the officer barked through the loudspeaker. "Hands where I can see them." Seagal turned confused. "Excuse me?" he asked calmly. "Now!" the officer shouted again, stepping out of the car, one hand resting dangerously close to his gun. People nearby froze. A man paying for gas stopped mid-swipe. A woman grabbed her child's hand and moved back toward her car. The tension was sudden, heavy, like a fuse had just been lit. Seagal, composed as ever, slowly raised his hands. "Officer," he said in a steady tone, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." But the cop wasn't listening. "Keep your hands where I can see them." He snapped again, voice shaking slightly, adrenaline taking control. Seagal stayed calm, his movements deliberate, measured, like a man who'd faced far worse in life than one panicked officer. He didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't reach for anything. Just silence and control. The bystanders started recording. You could feel the unease building second by second, and then the moment that would change everything. What happened next shocked everyone watching, especially the cop himself. The air at the gas station had gone completely still. The red and blue lights flashed across Steven Seagal's face, painting him in streaks of chaos. The young officer, now outside his cruiser, shouted commands like he was talking to a wanted fugitive. "Step away from the vehicle. Keep your hands visible." Seagal didn't move suddenly. His decades of experience in both martial arts and law enforcement told him that one wrong motion could turn deadly. He kept his hands up, voice low, calm, controlled. "Officer," he said, "I'm complying. I just want to know what this is about." But the cop wasn't listening. He was locked in a spiral of adrenaline and assumption. To him, this wasn't a movie star or a reserve sheriff, just a tall man in dark clothes, standing next to a black SUV with tinted windows in a rough neighborhood. The officer's radio crackled, but he didn't answer. He was focused, breathing hard, hand now fully gripping his gun. "I said back away from the car." Slowly, Seagal took one slow step back. "I don't want any trouble, officer," he said calmly. "You already have trouble," the cop barked. "Now show me what's in your pockets." From a few feet away, the gas station clerk peeked out nervously. A couple of bystanders held up their phones, recording everything. One man whispered, "Is that Steven Seagal?" The other shook his head, unsure. No way. He wouldn't be out here by himself. But Seagal was. He'd always lived like that, no bodyguards, no entourage. Just himself. The officer, sweating now, took a cautious step closer. "Do it, slowly!" Seagal's voice stayed perfectly calm. "Officer, my wallet's in my right jacket pocket. I'm going to take it out slowly, all right?" "Don't move!" the cop shouted. "I said don't." The silence was unbearable. The crowd gasped as the officer raised his gun, aiming it directly at Seagal's chest. You could almost hear hearts pounding, but Seagal didn't flinch. He didn't step forward. He didn't argue. He simply said, "Son, you're pointing that weapon at the wrong person." The cop's hand shook. The muzzle of the gun wavered. He barked again, louder, more desperate. "Get on the ground." The irony was brutal. Steven Seagal, a man who'd spent decades training officers around the world, was now being treated like a criminal by one of his own. But Seagal wasn't the kind of man to lose his temper. He'd seen too many lives destroyed by anger. He knew that when pride takes control, mistakes follow. So he slowly got down on one knee, hand still raised. "Easy, officer. Easy," he said quietly. The onlookers were whispering now, disbelief in every voice. "That's Seagal, man." "That's him?" "I know that voice, and that's definitely Steven Seagal." Phones kept rolling. Every moment was being caught from every angle, and still the cop had no idea who he was talking to. Seagal knelt there, calm as stone. The officer yelled into his radio for backup, his nerves shot, adrenaline pumping through his veins. But Seagal's silence, that eerie, unshakable calm, was beginning to unnerve him finally. Seagal spoke again, softly but firmly. "Son, I've been where you are. I know that kind of fear. But right now you're letting it control you." The officer blinked, thrown off. "What did you just say?" "I said," Seagal continued, "the badge gives you duty, not power. You're supposed to protect, not intimidate." The words hit differently. His tone wasn't angry. It was almost fatherly. For the first time, doubt flickered across the officer's face. He looked at Seagal and really looked, and something in his brain began connecting dots. The calm voice, the solid posture, the confidence that didn't come from arrogance, but training. The bystanders were now whispering loudly, "Hey, that's Steven Seagal. He's a lawman too. Yeah, he works with the sheriff's department." But before the truth could settle in, another moment of tension snapped everyone's attention back. The cop suddenly shouted, "Stop talking! Hands on your head." He was panicking, trying to reassert control. Seagal sighed quietly, almost disappointed. In that moment, he wasn't the action hero from the movies. He wasn't the fighter or the celebrity. He was simply a man trying to teach patience to someone who'd forgotten what authority really meant. The situation hung on a knife's edge. The next 5 minutes would decide who would walk away and who would face consequences. The officer's gun trembled again, pointed at the wrong man, and that's when the crowd started to step in. Someone shouted, "Hey, that's Steven Seagal. What are you doing?" "He's a cop too." The officer froze. Confusion flickered again, disbelief mixing with pride. But before he could react, more police sirens echoed in the distance. Backup was on its way. This moment, right here, would define everything that came next, because in less than 5 minutes, the tables would turn completely. Have you ever seen authority go too far? Tell me what you'd do in this situation, and comment below which city or country you're watching from right now. The sound of sirens pierced the tense silence. They grew louder with every passing second, the flashing lights reflecting off the gas pumps like sparks from a fuse that was about to blow. Steven Seagal stayed on one knee, calm, controlled. The young officer still had his gun aimed directly at Seagal's chest, breathing fast, eyes wide. The situation was moments away from spiraling completely out of control. Then 2 more patrol cars screeched to a stop at the station. Backup had arrived. 3 officers jumped out, hands on their weapons, scanning the scene. One of them shouted, "What's going on here?" The young cop yelled back, "Suspects refusing full compliance." Could be armed. But anyone looking at Seagal would have seen something else entirely. A man at peace, hands open, breathing slow. Not a single twitch of fear or aggression. The senior officer, a grizzled veteran with years on the force, squinted at Seagal, something about his face nagging at him. He took a cautious step forward, lowering his own weapon slightly. "Sir, name please," he called out. Seagal didn't answer immediately. Instead, he locked eyes with the young officer, still pointing the gun. "Is this how they're training new cops now?" he asked quietly. The veteran's brow furrowed. That voice, deep, steady, unmistakable. "Wait a second," he muttered. The rookie, still shaking, barked out, "Don't move! He was reaching for his pocket." Seagal replied, calm as ever, "I told you, my wallet's in my right jacket. Nothing else." The senior officer raised a hand toward his team. "Hold up, don't engage. Let me handle this." He walked closer, flashlight in hand, shining it on Seagal's face. And then it clicked. His eyes went wide. "Oh my God," he whispered. "That's Steven Seagal." The other officers froze. The rookie blinked, confused. "Wait, who?" The crowd erupted almost instantly. People shouted over each other. "He's an actor. He's a martial artist. He's a lawman too, man." The rookie's hands trembled. His gun wavered. His brain scrambled to catch up to what was happening. Seagal stood slowly, still calm, still composed. "Officer," he said softly, "you've been pointing a loaded weapon at a fellow law enforcement officer for 5 minutes." The rookie swallowed hard, his entire body shaking now. He stammered, I didn't know, sir." Seagal held up a hand. "Don't speak. Just listen. He stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice deep and deliberate. I told you I wasn't a threat. I told you I was cooperating, but you saw something else. You saw danger where there was none. The rookie's mouth opened, but no words came out. The veteran officer spoke next, tone sharp now. Officer Daniels, lower your weapon immediately. Daniels hesitated, then slowly lowered the gun, his face turning red with embarrassment. The crowd cheered quietly, phone still recording, capturing every second. Seagal took another step forward, closing the distance, but still keeping calm authority in his tone. Son, fear is natural, but the badge doesn't give you the right to use it against people. It gives you responsibility. The young cop nodded shakily. Yes, sir. Seagal sighed, almost disappointed. And right now you've let that fear take control. You almost made a fatal mistake, one you couldn't take back. The air felt lighter now, but no one dared speak. The only sound was the hum of police radios and distant traffic. The senior officer approached, removing his hat respectfully. Mr. Seagal, I am so sorry for this, sir. We had no idea, Seagal nodded. I'm not asking for special treatment. I just expect professionalism. That's all. He looked back at the rookie, his expression calm but firm. Son, if you're gonna wear that badge, learn what respect means for others and for yourself. The rookie looked down, shame flooding his face. Yes, sir. You're right. The tension finally began to break. One of the officers holstered his weapon. The crowd started clapping softly, relieved it was over. But Seagal wasn't done teaching. He turned toward the onlookers, his deep voice cutting through the chatter. This could have ended a lot worse, not because of hate, but because of fear. And if we don't learn to control that, it controls us. Every phone camera captured that line. Raw, honest, and powerful. The veteran officer nodded in agreement. Couldn't have said it better myself. As the situation de-escalated, the young officer was escorted back to his cruiser. Seagal stayed behind, speaking quietly to the senior cop about filing a report. The rookie sat in his car, trembling, realization sinking in. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Steven Seagal, the man famous for bringing lawbreakers to justice on screen, had just shown what real control looked like in real life. But this story wasn't over. Because in just a few minutes, the tables would turn even further, and the same officer who'd pulled a gun on Seagal would find himself in handcuffs. If you were in Steven Seagal's place right now, would you stay calm or would you react? Be honest and comment below. I want to know what you would have done. By now, the flashing lights had drawn a crowd. Dozens of people stood around the gas station, phones raised high, recording every second. The videos were already being uploaded to social media. Within minutes, the footage would explode online. Steven Seagal stood calmly beside his SUV, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The young officer, Daniels, looked pale and shaken, staring down at the ground as the weight of what he'd done began to sink in. The veteran officer tried to maintain control of the scene. All right, everyone, step back, he called out, raising his hand. This situation is under control, but it wasn't, not really. Because once the crowd realized who was standing there, nothing could contain it. Someone shouted from the back, "That's Steven Seagal!" Another voice followed, "Yeah, the movie star, and he's a cop too." The murmurs spread like wildfire. In seconds, the entire crowd knew. The veteran officer turned toward Seagal, voice low. "Sir, I think this is about to go viral." Seagal gave a half smile. It already has, he wasn't wrong. On multiple live streams, thousands of people were already typing comments. No way that rookie just pulled a gun on Steven Seagal. Bro doesn't even know he's about to lose his badge. Seagal's staying calm like a real-life action hero. At the gas station, the tension shifted. It was no longer about a possible arrest. It was about accountability. The veteran officer approached Seagal respectfully. "Mr. Seagal, sir, on behalf of the department, I truly apologize for what happened here tonight." Seagal nodded slightly. "Apology accepted. But this isn't about me. It's about the mindset." He turned his head toward Daniels, the rookie. "You saw a man standing near a car and assumed he was dangerous. You didn't ask questions. You drew your weapon." Daniels' voice was small, barely audible. "I thought you were reaching for something, sir." Seagal stepped closer, his tone still calm but powerful, the kind of voice that could silence a room. "You thought, but did you see? Did you listen? You were reacting to fear, not facts." The young cop swallowed hard. He couldn't look Seagal in the eyes. You wear that badge to serve people and not to scare them, Seagal continued. The moment you forget that, you become the very thing you're supposed to protect them from. Those words hit everyone standing there. Even the bystanders, even the veteran officers. The gas station went silent except for the faint hum of the fuel pumps. Then, as if on cue, someone yelled from the crowd, "Tell him who you really are, Steven." Seagal glanced at the voice, then turned back to Daniels. "I'm not just an actor. I'm a reserve deputy with the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. I've trained law enforcement around the world in tactics and restraint. What you did tonight?" He paused, letting the silence do the work. "Could have ended a life, mine or yours." The rookie's face turned red. His hand shook. I didn't know, sir. I swear I didn't know." Seagal's voice softened just a little. "I believe you. But ignorance isn't an excuse. It's a warning. Learn from it, or it'll happen again to someone else." The veteran officer looked furious now. Not at Seagal, but at the rookie. "Daniels, you're done for the night. Hand over your weapon." The crowd gasped as the rookie's eyes widened. "Sir, please, do it," the veteran said firmly. Slowly, with trembling hands, Daniels unholstered his gun and handed it over. The veteran handed it to another officer, shaking his head. Seagal didn't say a word. He just watched quietly as justice began to balance itself. But then something unexpected happened. From the edge of the crowd, a young woman's voice shouted, "Mr. Seagal, are you pressing charges?" Everyone went silent. All eyes turned to him. Seagal looked around, at the cameras, the flashing lights, the nervous rookie. He could have humiliated the young man. He could have demanded his arrest. He could have let anger take over, but that wasn't Steven Seagal's way. "No," he said calmly, "not tonight." The veteran looked surprised. "You're letting him go?" Seagal nodded. "I don't need him punished. I need him changed." The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of relief, respect, and admiration. Daniel stood there, tears threatening to fall, completely humbled, but Seagal wasn't finished. He stepped closer again, lowering his voice so only the rookie could hear. "You'll remember this night for the rest of your life. Make sure it makes you better, not bitter." The rookie nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." As Seagal turned to leave, the veteran officer stopped him. "Mr. Seagal," he said quietly, "there's still a report to file. But honestly, this might be the most important lesson this department's had in years." Seagal gave a small smile. Then maybe something good came out of it. The crowd began to disperse, but the cameras stayed rolling. Within hours, the footage of Seagal's composure and words of wisdom would spread worldwide. Millions of views, thousands of comments. And yet the story wasn't over. Because back at the precinct, higher-ups had already seen the video, and the decision they were about to make would shock everyone, including the young cop himself. Do you think Steven Seagal made the right choice by forgiving the cop instead of pressing charges? Type forgive if you agree, or charge if you think he should have made him face the law. The night at the gas station ended quietly. The crowd dispersed, the flashing lights faded, and Steven Seagal drove off without another word. But while Seagal's calm presence had diffused the chaos in public, the real storm was only just beginning, behind closed doors. By the next morning, the video had gone viral. Millions of people had already watched the footage online. News anchors replayed it on every major network. A rookie police officer pulled a gun on legendary actor and reserve deputy Steven Seagal in what many are calling a shocking case of police overreach. Clips of the confrontation circulated non-stop. Seagal's calm tone, the rookie's trembling hand, and the final moment when Seagal said, "Fear isn't strength." The public had made up its mind. They called Seagal a hero of restraint. They called the officer reckless. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere was heavy. The rookie, Officer Daniels, sat alone at his desk, staring blankly at the blank pages of his report. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the look on Seagal's face. Calm, composed, disappointed. The door opened and his commanding officer, Captain Reeves, stepped in. His expression was unreadable. "Daniels," he said, "conference room now." Daniels stood, straightened his uniform, and followed. Inside the room sat three people: the captain, the police chief, and an internal affairs investigator. A laptop sat open in front of them, the paused video of the incident on screen. The chief pressed play. The familiar voices filled the room. "Step away from the vehicle. "Officer, I'm complying." "Don't move!" When the clip ended, silence filled the air. "Officer Daniels," the chief said slowly, "do you understand how serious this is?" Daniels nodded weakly. "Yes, sir." "You pulled a loaded weapon on a law enforcement officer who was unarmed, compliant, and respectful," the chief continued. "And worse, you did it without any reasonable suspicion." Daniels swallowed hard.
"Sir, I thought he was reaching for a weapon. Thought."
The chief interrupted sharply. "You didn't confirm. You didn't assess. You assumed." The internal affairs officer leaned forward. "Do you realize how close you came to ending a man's life? And not just any man. A fellow officer with a national reputation?" Daniels felt the sting of those words like a punch to the chest. "I know, sir," he said quietly. "I panicked." "Panic," the chief said coldly, "doesn't belong on the street with a badge." There was a long silence. Daniels stared at the floor, his face pale. Finally, Captain Reeves spoke, his tone softer. "Steven Seagal chose not to press charges, Daniels. That's the only reason you're sitting here right now and not in a holding cell." Daniels looked up, surprised. He forgave me?" Reeves nodded. "He did. But that doesn't mean there won't be consequences." He slid a document across the table. "Effective immediately, you're suspended pending investigation." Daniels' heart sank. He signed the paper with trembling hands. But just as he thought things couldn't get worse, the internal affairs officer spoke again. "Officer Daniels, there's one more issue we need to address." Daniels frowned. "Sir?" The officer turned the laptop around. On screen was another video, one the public hadn't seen yet. It showed Daniels from earlier that same week during a routine traffic stop. His tone was aggressive, his body language intimidating, and his behavior unprofessional. "This was sent to us anonymously," the officer said. "You've shown a pattern of behavior, profiling, intimidation, abuse of power." Daniel's stomach turned. "Sir, I didn't mean—" The chief raised his hand. "Stop, we're past apologies." He nodded to the captain. "Reeves, read him his rights." Daniels froze. "What am I being—" "Yes," Reeves said quietly. "You're under arrest for misconduct and violation of departmental policy under Section 47B. You'll face a disciplinary board and possible termination." The room spun around him. The sound of his own heartbeat roared in his ears. The irony hit him like a brick. The man who'd drawn a gun on Steven Seagal was now the one being cuffed. Reeves placed the handcuffs gently but firmly on Daniel's wrists. "I'm sorry, son," he said. "You had potential, but you let fear ruin it." Daniel stared at the floor as the cuffs clicked shut, the same metallic sound he'd once heard during arrests, now echoing behind him. Outside, the press had already gathered. Cameras flashed as he was escorted to a patrol car. Questions flew like bullets. "Officer Daniels, any comment? Do you regret pulling your gun on Steven Seagal? Was this racially motivated?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Back inside the precinct, Captain Reeves sighed deeply. "Get Seagal on the phone," he said. "He deserves to know." Minutes later, Seagal picked up. His voice was calm as always. "Captain." "Mr. Seagal," Reeves said. "Just wanted you to know, Daniels has been placed under arrest for misconduct. The board will take it from here." There was a pause. Then Seagal spoke quietly. "Justice isn't about revenge, Captain. It's about balance. I just hope this helps him find it." Reeves nodded. "I think it will." When he hung up, Seagal stood by his window looking out at the sunrise. His reflection stared back. Older, wiser, and unshaken. He'd spent years in movies showing justice as something loud and violent. But tonight proved something else. That real strength was in control. And as the news spread worldwide, one message echoed louder than any headline. Power isn't in the gun you hold. It's in the restraint to never need it. What do you think? Did the rookie deserve to be arrested, or should he have been given another chance? Comment your thoughts below. I'm reading every single one. By sunrise, the story was everywhere. Clips of the confrontation between Steven Seagal and the rookie officer flooded every social media feed. News anchors debated it on live television. Podcasts dissected every word Seagal had said. Reaction videos popped up from Los Angeles to London, from Tokyo to Toronto. The world couldn't believe what they'd seen, not just because a cop had pulled a gun on a global action star, but because of how Seagal handled it. He didn't yell. He didn't retaliate. He didn't let ego or anger take control. Instead, He stood for something far bigger: discipline, respect, and calm under pressure. A popular headline read, "Steven Seagal shows the world what real strength looks like." Another said, "In 5 minutes, Seagal taught a lesson most people never learn in a lifetime." Clips of Seagal's quiet line, "The badge gives you duty, not power," were shared by police departments across the country as a training example. Even critics who once called him too old school praised his composure. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Officer Daniels sat in a holding cell, staring at the gray wall in silence. The sound of keys clanking in the hallway broke his thoughts. Captain Reeves appeared outside the bars, hands in his pockets. "Got someone who wants to talk to you," he said. Daniels looked up, expecting a lawyer. But when the door opened, he froze. Steven Seagal stepped in. For a moment, Daniels didn't speak. Shame covered his face like a shadow. "Sir," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." Seagal walked closer, his boots echoing softly on the concrete. "I'm exactly where I need to be," he replied. Daniels looked down, avoiding his eyes. "I made a mistake." "A bad one," Seagal nodded. "Yes, you did. But I didn't come here to remind you of that. I came to make sure you learn from it." Daniels looked confused. "Why do you even care?" "You could have ruined me, but instead you forgave me." Seagal took a breath. "Because someone once did the same for me." He leaned against the bars, voice deep and steady. "When I was young, I was angry, impatient, thought strength was about control. But a man, a real officer, taught me that true power comes from restraint. He didn't lecture me. He showed me. Just like I'm trying to show you." Daniels swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't deserve that kind of grace." Seagal smiled faintly. "Then earn it. Every day from here on out." For a long moment, the two men just stood there, silence heavy with meaning. Then Seagal turned to leave. Before he stepped out, he paused and said, "Fear is human, Daniels. But letting it drive your actions, that's weakness. Control it, or it'll control you." Then he was gone. Later that day, Seagal held a press conference. Cameras flashed, microphones surrounded him, and reporters threw questions from every direction. "Mr. Seagal, how did it feel having a gun pointed at you? Do you think the officer should lose his badge permanently? What message do you want to send to law enforcement?" Seagal raised his hand gently, silencing the room. "I don't want revenge," he said slowly. "I want reflection. That young man made a mistake, one that could have ended 2 lives. But mistakes can teach if you let them." He continued, his voice calm and deliberate. "I've worked with officers across the world. Some wear the badge for power. The best wear it for service. That's what the world needs right now, more servants, fewer egos." The room went completely silent. Every camera stayed locked on him. Then a reporter asked, "So what would you say to people watching this, especially those who've experienced abuse of power?" Seagal looked directly into the lens. "I'd tell them this: don't let hate be your teacher. Let it be your test. The way you respond defines you more than what was done to you." That line hit like lightning. Within hours, it was trending worldwide, quoted, remixed, and turned into inspirational clips. Even major police departments began sharing Seagal's speech during morning briefings, calling it a masterclass in emotional control. Meanwhile, inside his cell, Daniels watched the same press conference on a small TV. He listened carefully to every word, tears forming in his eyes. He realized then that Seagal hadn't humiliated him, he'd saved him. Not just from punishment, but from a lifetime of anger and pride. For the first time in years, Daniels bowed his head and whispered, "I'll be better." And somewhere across the city, Seagal sat alone in quiet reflection. He wasn't celebrating or seeking praise, he just hoped the message spread. That one man's calm could stop a storm before it ever began. Because in the end, that was his greatest lesson. You don't need to fight fire with fire. Sometimes the real victory is peace. If you were Steven Seagal, would you forgive the cop like he did, or demand justice? Comment "forgive" or "justice" below. I'll pin the best replies. Weeks passed since the night at the gas station, but the world still hadn't stopped talking about Steven Seagal. The viral footage had become one of the most watched clips of the year. Hundreds of millions of views, shared on every platform, translated into dozens of languages. People weren't watching because it was dramatic. They were watching because it was real. Clips of Seagal's calm voice played on podcasts, news panels, even classrooms. A high school teacher in Texas showed the video to her students saying, "This is what real composure looks like." A police training academy in Canada replayed Seagal's line, "The badge gives you duty, not power." Recruits sat in silence, listening carefully. Even in small villages halfway across the world, people quoted him online, "Control your fear. Don't let it control you." Steven Seagal had unknowingly started a global conversation, not about violence, not about fame, but about humility. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels faced his disciplinary board. He stood before a panel of senior officers, voice trembling, heart heavy. "I was wrong," he said honestly. "I let fear and pride make me forget why I became a cop. Mr. Seagal showed me that strength isn't about control. It's about composure." The room stayed quiet for a long time. Then one of the board members finally spoke. "Officer Daniels," she said, "the department has decided to suspend you for 6 months without pay. You'll be required to complete additional training on de-escalation and public engagement. But," she paused, "we're giving you a second chance." Daniels exhaled, a breath he'd been holding for weeks. He nodded firmly. "Thank you, ma'am. I won't waste it." After the hearing, he walked outside into the bright morning sun. Reporters waited, microphones ready. But this time, Daniels didn't hide. He looked into the cameras and said, "I made a mistake. I own it. I learned from it. And I hope every officer watching learns from it too." That short clip went viral again, not because of Seagal, but because of the change Seagal had inspired. Later that evening, Steven Seagal sat in his quiet home, sipping tea as the news played softly on the TV. He smiled faintly when he saw Daniel's apology. "Good," he murmured. "He's learning." A reporter's voice played in the background. What started as a tense confrontation between a young cop and Hollywood legend Steven Seagal has turned into a global lesson in discipline, forgiveness, and accountability. Seagal turned off the TV and stepped outside. The night air was cool, the moon bright above the trees. He thought about the chaos of that night, the flashing lights, the trembling gun, the fear in that young man's eyes, and how close they both came to becoming another tragic headline, but instead, it became a story of control, forgiveness, and change. As he stood there, his phone buzzed. A message from Captain Reeves. "You changed more than one life that night, brother. The department's rewriting training policies based on your speech." Seagal smiled. "That's the real victory," he typed back. Because for him, it was never about the fame or the footage. It was about the message. The world didn't need more heroes with weapons. It needed more men with wisdom. The next morning, Seagal released a short video message to his followers. He spoke calmly, directly into the camera. "We live in a time where power is misunderstood. People think it's about who can shout the loudest, who can dominate the fastest, who can pull the trigger first. But real power, the kind that changes lives, is the power to stay calm when you're disrespected, to stay wise when you're provoked, and to stay human when you're afraid." The video ended with a single line on screen. "Control is strength. Respect is power." It went viral instantly, millions of shares, billions of impressions, and thousands of heartfelt comments. And in one of those comments, buried among millions, was a short message from a familiar name. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." Officer D. Steven Seagal smiled quietly when he saw it. Not because he'd won, but because someone else finally understood. If you believe no one should be judged by appearance and that real strength is calm under pressure, type respect in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire, humble, and remind us what true power really means.